Hey everyone, Doc T here with another episode of the Horses Advocate podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. A quick note, we're about to be hit by Hurricane Milton down here in South Florida. For those of you who know that I live down here in South Florida, so far the reports say that it's going to be a tropical storm where we are, which means, some wind and rain, but nothing like a hurricane because it'll be passing north of us. So save your thoughts and prayers for those who are in the path of it because it's going to be a devastating hurricane because of its attack directly on Tampa. Also, just 2 weeks ago, we had the Hurricane Helene, who went up through Florida in the Big Bend area and then scooted up into Georgia and the Carolinas, North Carolina, receiving so much damage. This is where we all can help. And it doesn't matter whether you don't have money or don't have the connections or are unable to do something physically. We all have the ability to send our thoughts as we lay our heads on the pillow at night and just pray for them. All right. We who have survived many hurricanes down here have get this guilty feeling that, gosh, the hurricane missed us. And I guess they call it survivor's guilt, but it doesn't matter. If it's not our turn this time, it'll be our turn next time. We've had two Category 3s go right over my house with the eye, literally walking out in the middle of the hurricane, seeing blue skies up above and no rain and no wind because we are sent in the center of the hurricanes. It happened twice here in at my house. And then the devastation comes in, the backside of the hurricane just tears everything apart. So we've been through it ourselves. It's not our turn according to the path, but we don't know. Things can change in the next 24 hours, and it can wreak havoc down here. I don't know, but we're adhering to the two rules of hurricanes, and you can take this with all your hurricane preparedness for your horses. If you're in a surge area or water will flood you, get the horses out of there. If you're in a place where it's windy, make sure that your barn structure is able to stand the wind strength that's coming at you. Most of the buildings down here are built to at least Category 3 protection and also to 4. 5 is tough and it's scary. 180-mile-an-hour wind. I mean, you can stick your head out of your car at 80 miles an hour and add 100 miles on top of that. It's crazy. But anyway, I just want to start this podcast by saying that all of us here in my family and those that I visit at the farms are all of our thoughts and prayers are going out to each and every one of you and to your horses and your dogs and your other pets that you've got, that you get through this okay with minimal damage. But the anxiety level is almost insurmountable. I understand that. And it wouldn't surprise me if none of you are listening to me who are in the hurricane path or have suffered from Helene and don't listen to this podcast till, a year later. I get it. I understand that. But I need to put it out there that we are all one big family. We're all here as horse owners, and we all are here to help our horses. And sometimes all we can do is just, close our eyes at night and become quiet and just pray for nothing but goodness coming to those who are in the path of destruction. Anyway, okay, let's move on. I want to announce that I like to change my format of these podcasts where I have a subject or maybe a couple of subjects that I want to throw out there and make a format where I get into it very briefly. And you know me, it's hard for me to make anything brief. That my podcasts seem to go on forever. I love taking magazines here, equine veterinary education, and going through articles in there. And I like to do more of those, and maybe they'll be a bit longer. But I just want to take a little bit of time on this one to talk about a book that I'm reading, which has nothing to do with horses. And it's fascinating because it's a spy novel written by David Baldacci, who's written, 50 different books. He's just very prolific, about a company that manages perception, and they create crises that people respond to. And it was so impactful to the point where I almost hate the book, because I know that in politics today, we are told so much information that conflicts. And then we do finger pointing and say, well, you're lying to me and you're feeding me misinformation. And then nobody can figure out what's the truth. And in this book that's fiction, it's as real as the truth that's out there. But here at the Horse's Advocate, our whole mission, my whole mission, is to help you understand that there are some basic facts about keeping horses that we all have to work at. So when we are faced with information, we can ask ourselves, well, is this legitimate or not? And here's a great example. We've been told that horses should have hay in front of them 24/7, 365. Otherwise, they're going to get quote unquote ulcers. And nobody's actually said, well, are they gastric ulcers or hindgut ulcers or what kind of ulcers? Where's the proof? There is none. It's just something that's out there that may have been created by those people who like to sell hay. Just a guess, because when you look at the number of times a horse chews, and this is good valued information because I actually know the researcher, Professor Emeritus at Cornell, we know that they chew maybe 1/3 to 1/2 of a day. And that means there's another 12 or more hours where they're not chewing at all. So they're not meal takers because no horse has a gallbladder to store bile. So they don't have to wait for a meal to inject bile into the intestines. They're constantly secreting that. So what is it that we need to know about feeding our horses? When should we feed a horse? And that boils down to a lot of things, whether you feed grain or not. And, here at the Horse Advocate, there is no, I shouldn't say there's no time that a horse should be fed grain, but the number of horses that should be fed grain are so small in this percent of the population that I'd say less than 5% of all horses out there should be fed grain. And those that should be fed grain are debilitated, they're aging, they're losing a lot of condition. And we understand that some sort of metabolic process is failing in these horses and they're wasting away in front of you and you have to do something to get some energy in there. But if you're going to feed grain, feed a whole grain and not a bag full of 10, 15, 20 different ingredients. Just feed oats, just feed corn, and do it properly and with intent that you're actually seeing the results. But why am I spending any time on that 5 or less percent of horses when you guys are listening and most likely have 95% of the horses that don't need grain? So now we're going back to, should horses be fed 24/7? Well, there's some evidence that came to my inbox from a client who found a person in, where was it? In Britain, Great Britain, who said that studies have been done where if they withheld hay during the day, horses would start to have gastric problems in the form of ulcerations. Oh, that would be stomach ulcers. But if they were withheld hay at night, they didn't have them. And I've been telling people, stop feeding your horse around, 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, and don't feed them again. Don't offer them any more hay if they're being stalled overnight. Don't offer them any more hay until, 7, 8, 9 in the morning. Give them 12 hours or more off from eating, and these horses will be just fine. And I've known this for a long time, and it works. And now there's some science behind it. So if you're not going to feed your horse at night, you're okay. One of the most important things is make sure that there's hay in the stomach before you start exercising the horse, because when they exercise or when you put them on a trailer, they are going to get jostled around. If they don't have food in that stomach to absorb the acid that they're secreting, you can get ulcerations. And this actually was told to me by the maker or the veterinarian who worked on the project of creating GastroGuard, who said to all of us veterinarians who are listening to his presentation, he said, if you really want to stop gastric ulcers, make sure that there's hay in the belly before you exercise your horses, and you won't have gastric ulcers. So we've known this for decades, But I'm suspicious that in the scientific report, they had ulcers during the day because the horses were moving during the day. And if they had empty stomachs, they were splashing the acid up on the sensitive portion of the stomach and getting the glandular ulcers, non-glandular area getting ulcers. So in a nutshell, if you don't want to feed hay to your horses during the night, you'll be okay. If you don't want to feed hay during the day, you can start to get gastric ulcers, most likely from movement of the horse, where the acid that's being produced will splash up onto the sensitive areas. But if you withhold hay at night, not only are you not going to have gastric ulcers, but you're going to give the assembly line, called the digestive system, a chance to calm down, to go through its repair, to have that downtime where in the cell they can start cleaning up the reactive oxygen species, which we also know as free radicals, and the cells can repair themselves and get ready for the next onslaught of food that comes in later in the day, the following morning. So that's it in a nutshell as far as feeding hay. And that's a great example of a lot of us being managed by some sort of perception manager, somebody who has an agenda of maybe selling you more hay or whatever. I don't know. I have no proof, but I know that in the 1970s, when I started with horses, there was no such rule that horses need hay 24/7. It's just not right. And it's very expensive, and it doesn't help your horse, and it leads to obesity because hay is loaded with sugar. And excess sugar that comes in the diet will be retained on the horse as excess body fat. It's the only way you can get body fat is to have excess sugar put in the mouth or metabolic processes that aren't working properly. And feeding 24/7 will accentuate that. So having time off, some restricted time for eating, will help these horses become healthier. And that requires us to think differently. So as we try to embrace new thoughts, you can ask yourself, how's what you're doing working for you? And if you say, well, the horses aren't working well, they have illnesses, obesity, insulin resistance, Cushing's disease, they're lame, they're breaking down, the hooves aren't right, then what you're doing isn't working. But the problem is, as a friend of mine said to me a very long time ago, decades ago, he said, when you're putting your pants on in the morning, assuming that you put one leg into the pants at a time, most of us will put our right leg in, and then we'll put our left leg in and pull our pants up. And he said to me, I want you to try starting tomorrow morning to take the opposite leg that you use and stick your left leg in first before your right leg. And my wife says, oh, I don't care. I put my left leg, my right leg, it doesn't matter. I said, well, you're very special. But me, I always put my right leg in first. It's just a habit I've done for all my life. And the morning that I went to put my left leg in, oh my gosh, it was such a mind change that I felt so uncomfortable because I was trying to change something that I believed in, my routine, my habit. And we find we do the same thing with our horses. We're in a routine. We feed this way. We go to the barn at this hour. We do this. We go out at 11 o'clock at night and do quote unquote night check because we feel like we're responsible for our horses. And when we see them sitting there with no hay in there, we throw them another flake of hay in, not realizing that we've added a ton of calories. We've disturbed their sleep, and we're not helping them. So try putting your pant leg on differently tomorrow morning. Try asking yourself if what you're doing, is it really working? And if not, what can you do to change that? The whole drive of this Horses Advocate is to help horses thrive in a human world, period. That's it. And we have to do something different if they're not surviving. If they're doing well, fine, don't change. But you have to honor the way they've evolved. And you have to realize that I don't care how young you are listening to this. If you're just an 18, 20, 25-year-old, 30-year-old who's listening to this, and sorry, you think you know it all, you don't. Because when you sit with 50 years of experience with horses and you listen to people who've been around horses for almost 100 years, you're going to realize that all these new changes are creating more and more problems. I've gone over the list of the diseases and lamenesses that horses have that they did not have back in the 70s, including obesity, equine metabolic syndrome. Yeah, we had it in ponies, but we hardly ever had it in horses. Horses, thoroughbreds and warm bloods rarely got laminitis. They didn't get lame, they just didn't. But we didn't have kissing spine. We didn't have nephrosplenic ligament entrapment. We didn't have white line disease in our hooves. We didn't have dental diseases like EOTRH or even dental cavities that caused cheek tooth fractures. They just didn't exist. Now they're everywhere. And veterinarians and farriers are hustling, trying to fix all these problems. But we here at the Horses Advocate say, isn't it better to prevent them? So understand that in the horse world, there are people who are in charge of perception management, and they are trying to help you perceive things in a way that benefits them and not your horse. To me, it's so obvious because I have 51 years of looking at this industry and how it's changed and how many people are trying to earn money by giving you information that supports them and not your horse. Here's another great example. We are told over and over again, stop eating processed foods. There are so many people who have horses that have told me, I don't believe in processed foods. We should be eating wholesome, organically grown, if we can identify it, we should eat it. And then they turn around and they pour a bag that has 10, 20, 30 ingredients listed on the back label you can't even pronounce. How on earth is that good for our horses if it's not good for us? So we have to stop and just ask ourselves and be honest with ourselves. Is what we're doing working? And if it isn't, what are we willing to do to change that? And again, if you're here at the Horses Advocate listening to me, I hope that I'm giving you some information in the past podcasts and the future podcasts that help you say, okay, I get it. So I want to leave you with one thought that I've mentioned before in previous podcasts, and I'll probably do in tons more podcasts, because if I repeat this, it should help you. Okay, I want you to think of a stream, a flow of water that's going in front of you. It could be a couple of feet wide. It could be, a mile wide, a river. I don't care. Whatever it is, you've got this flow of water. And on one end, you've got water coming in and it's flowing across, and then it's leaving the other side. And you're on the embankment and you're just watching the water flow by. Okay? Now, I want you to think of an event, heavy rain, or some reason that the amount of water coming into the river increases. And when you do, the outflow isn't ready for this increase. So there's some resistance here that causes the river to widen and to overflow its banks and go through the fields or go through whatever. There's an overflow. It can't be contained. That image is increased food coming into the GI tract that can't get out because we don't need that energy, that all those fuels that we're putting in the mouth, we don't need. So the body stores it as body fat. And that's the river overflowing into the adjacent fields. So we put the horse or ourselves on a diet that restricts the inflow, so the fields recede and now the waters are within that river. Now that works fine if you're a teenager or if you're in your 20s. But as time marches on, we get debris at the other end. We get resistance. We get beavers building a dam, for instance. We have all sorts of things happening at the metabolic end that prevents efficiency of that fuel being used. And when that happens, the water that's coming in can't escape fast enough. So you get this flooding of the field again. So you have increased body fat and you have breakdown of organs and of cells, and that lead to lameness or metabolic syndrome, illness, colic, cancer, failure of organs, and finally death. And that's because we've accumulated too much resistance at this end. So how do we get rid of this? Well, according to what I've read, the best way to open up this and get it flowing again is exercise. So it goes back to diet and exercise is the best way to get this flow going across here. So we have to now look at that in our horses. We've been focusing on diet for a long time, getting the right foods in there, getting the right amounts, getting the right materials in there to make sure that the processes work. And we have to look at how we can make these processes more efficient. And the best way we can do that is, number one, remove all inflammatory foods. That will help get that flow going. Because if you look at any food, whether you're a horse or human, that food represents fuel, and fuel is stored energy. And this world is all about energy. That's all it is. And energy is going to come into you or your horse through a food. And then through a process called digestion, that fuel is going to be extracted and either used or stored. Used or stored. That's all food can do. It can be either used or stored. And then at the other end, through the processes of metabolism, such as just being alive or moving around or competing in a sport, we're going to consume that fuel by drawing it out either directly from the food or from our storage units. The storage in horses is glycogen and body fat. And we're going to consume that and decrease what's in the field. So if we decrease what's coming in here and increase here, we are going to make the river dry up and overwork them to death. We've seen that. The opposite is we overfeed and don't work. We're sedentary. The horse is just sitting out in the field doing nothing, and they become obese. Just think of that as the water flooding the fields, and you have to balance what's coming in with what's going out. The problem is we think we have to keep throwing food in here because that equals love. But just remember, energy in the form of fuel that is in the food that we're feeding is either going to be used or stored. And if it's going to be stored, it's going to broaden this river. It's going to come out as body fat, or it's going to be used in some sort of exercise where it can be burned up and expelled as carbon dioxide and water. Everything you put in as food is going to be released as carbon dioxide, which is a gas that you exhale, or water that you're going to sweat out or urinate out. And that's it. Just remember that. That will help you as you look at your horse and you just look at him hard and you say, how's my river looking? Is it overflowing the banks? Is it starting to dry up? Is he being fed commensurate to his exercise? And understand that you have to not be emotionally attached to, does my horse love me? If not, I have to feed them. And say, am I really an advocate for my horse? Am I really responsible for my horse? Do I really want them to thrive in this world that I've got them in a stall or in a pasture where they're unable to roam and get all the foods that they could get if they were migrating? What can I do to improve that situation? And can I change in the diet, or can I change it into what they do as far as work goes? And you have to match these two so the river that's coming in is going to flow through unobstructed and remain within its bank walls and flow well. Because when the river stops flowing, we're dead. Sorry, it's just that simple. It's in pure physics. If we don't have air, the river stops flowing. If you don't have water, the river stops flowing. Okay, we're not going to discuss those. We know we have plenty of air as long as we're breathing, and we should have plenty of water. But when it comes down to foods, the fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, are we putting them in the right way that this river is flowing in the right direction? So just keep that in mind. Perception is what we believe. Is the sky really blue? Does the earth really circle the sun? You know, these are our perceptions. If I drop something, it's going to fall down, right? Not if I'm in the space station. If I let go, it may just float there or go up. It all depends on where we are. But our perceptions are based on what we know. And sometimes we have to change what we know. Sometimes we have to put our pant leg on with a different leg in the morning and say, I'm willing to change. I'm willing to work hard. I'm willing to understand what it is exactly my horse needs. Perception management is up to you. It's what you think. I'm here to help you find what it takes to make our horses thrive in a human world. And I appreciate you coming here to learn that. So I'm going to wrap it up. And again, my thoughts and prayers go out to all that are suffering, not just through hurricanes, but in war zones, in personal health reasons that are going on in your own life. Life isn't fair. I'm learning this rapidly. Life just, it happens, and sometimes you don't come out a winner. But when it comes to our horses, we are responsible to give them the best life that they need. And we have to understand how their system works. And that's what we're here for. So thanks for joining me, the Horses Advocate. I'm going to sign off, and I hope this your life is flowing and it is good. And if not, that we spend a moment sometime in our life to just pray for those who are not as fortunate. Thank you for spending your time here, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye. Hey everyone, Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review? However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There's two reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me. And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.